Welcome, Will Harris, to the program. So glad to have you here today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, pleasure's all mine. What I talk about with my people a lot is about how we're going to have to start doing things very differently in the future. And much of that is going to be of no surprise to, say, my great grandparents and every generation prior. We have to be smart about being in relation with each other, with the land, with the animals. And I know you are just a world leader in that. So let's start there. Tell us about your operation and how you kind of got on the path you're on.
White Oak Pastures, thank you. White Oak Pastures is our family farm in Bluffton, Georgia. Bluffton is in southwest Georgia in Clay County, which in 2020 was the poorest county in the United States of America.
Hmm.
And my great grandfather came here in 1866 and started White Oak Pastures and ran the farm, followed by his son, my grandfather, followed by his son, my father. My father was born in 1920, took over the farm post World War II, 1946. And my dad was a very successful farmer. He it was on his watch that the farm was industrialized. Under his dad and granddad, it had been a multi-species farm, raised a lot of different animals, slaughtered them on the farm, sold the meat 6 days a week in Bluffton, a little town here. My dad took a lot of pride in the fact that he moved the business to a purely cattle operation. He was very, very good at it and knew a lot about it and very focused on it and took a lot of pride in that and was very successful. The farm, when I inherited the farm, there was no debt, about 1,000 acres of land. And my dad had done a really good job. And all I ever wanted to do was what he did. I was born in 1954, went to the University of Georgia, majored in animal science. And in an effort to come home and do what my dad did, industrially raise cattle. And I did. I came home and raised cattle very industrially, same model as my dad, probably torqued it up a few degrees and ran it for 20 years that way and made money doing it.
Now, you mentioned industrialized. What does that mean?
So in my mind, food production today, farming in this country is industrialized, commoditized, and centralized.
Hmm.
And we could talk a lot about what those things mean. We probably spend the day talking about it. But industrialization means we took something that was very cyclical, this farm, and turned it into something very linear. Instead of being a production system, we became one segment of a very long production chain. Under my dad's watch, we were simply the place that owned the mama cows, gave birth to the calves, and shipped them to the feedlots in the Midwest. We actually had feedlots here for a while, but ultimately shipped them to the Midwest to feedlots.
In that industrialization, when we sort of impose our will on the order of things there, what's wrong with that? It seems very cost effective.
It is super cost effective in terms of production, but the costs are spun off somewhere else.
Mm.
You know the way I used to raise cattle, produce beef, was very, very cost effective. I could produce pounds of beef at a very, very low dollar value. But that dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
I was contributing to that. And the pesticide buildup that's going on all over the world, I was contributing to that. I can go on and on about things I was contributing to in this effort to produce very low quality feeder, low priced feeder calves. So I was spending the cost off to other areas.
And so, Will, what was your wake up call? I mean, did you wake up one day with a blinding epiphany and say, I got to do this differently, or did it sort of grow on you?
Well, it's kind of a blinding epiphany, although I don't know that I would have used those words. Yeah, I think that I went from really enjoying the industrial cattle production that my dad did and I learned at the University of Georgia to not liking it much because of the excesses of that system.
Mhm.
And I became aware of it because I was very excessive even within that excessive system. You know, if the label rate on the pesticide said a pint per acre, I probably put a quart. And if it said give the animals 2 cc's per 100 pounds of body weight, I probably gave them 3 or 4. So I
Mhm.
was very heavy handed. I thought that was, for whatever reasons, I thought that was what I should do. And probably because I was heavy handed, I became aware of the unintended consequences more so than my others in my peer group.
Hmm. And what would some of those consequences have been that you noticed?
So probably the most profound is the organic matter in my soil went
Hmm.
from over 5% to about a 0.5%, 1/10. And I saw that. I realized it. I went from, I would put copious amounts of ammoniated fertilizer, which oxidizes the organic matter in the soil, and felt really good about it. I grew copious amounts of forage because I did that. And the level of organic matter in the soil was not something I was focused on. When I sent my soil samples to the University of Georgia, it cost a lot of money to get them to do an organic matter test. I mean, we didn't do that. So the decline of from 5% to 0.5% essentially was unnoticed unless you got out there and looked for it.
Hmm.
And I simply got out there and looked for
So, I, we have a hobby farm here. We got three belted Galloways, got some chickens, got about 6 acres of decent pasture. It's probably tillable. But when we got here, it had been owned by some wealthy people who let the farmer up the road just cut hay and had been hayed out probably 15, 20 years with nothing put back on. So when we did our first soil test, zeroed. We were zeroed out. And it's a very well drained soil, very low carbon, and also clay. So we're just trying to get it back up the curve as quickly as we can. What would your advice be for us?
animal impact. You will never be able to cost effectively rebuild that soil without animal impact. And the more animal impact you can put on, the more judicious animal impact you can put on. It is incumbent upon you to restart the cycles of nature on that farm.
Hmm.
And the cycles of nature are, to name a few, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the microbial cycle, the mineral cycle, the grazing cycle. Probably cycles we don't even recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And for all of those cycles and you don't fix one cycle and leave the rest of them, or fix all of them but one. It don't work like that. You either fix it or you don't. And animal impact is an essential element in fixing it. When you said this guy I've been cutting hay off that farm for years, I grimaced inside, maybe outside, because I know what that does. It's
Mm-hmm.
bad, but it can be fixed.
Now, I mean, to me, all I care about is the soil. So when we first got here, there were little dust devils because it's very sandy. It was a drought year. Uh, and this year is the first year where I went out and I don't know how it happened, but there are worms all over the field. There's worm casings again, right? Because what I'm trying to do here is just allow the grass to grow up. I had to bring in some micronutrients. We were totally stripped clean of boron, sulfur, zinc, even sodium. We were out like zeroed. So I didn't know what to do besides bring those back because we're on a fairly sandy soil. I didn't think it I didn't know how to get it liberated. So I threw that back on. It helped a lot. Um, but now all I care about is do we see I saw crumbles for the first time. This is our third year on it. So but I'm an impatient kind of. I want to speed this up as much as possible.
Good luck.
Have
Yeah.
Good luck. Come
Yeah.
on. What's the magic bullet here? Well, compost teas, buying those special supplements from somewhere.
Well, you said that guy's been baling hay on your farm and hauling it off for
Hmm.
years. Then you're doing the opposite, bringing hay onto the farm and putting it through particularly ruminant animals,
Hmm.
bringing other feeds onto the farm, importing. The farm's been exported and exported and exported, and sadly
Yep.
now you've got to import and import and import. Now,
Hmm.
it can be done without that, but it's decades and decades, maybe centuries. But it can be fixed much more quickly if you will reverse the process and haul onto the farm what you previously hauled off of the farm. But it does need to be turned into manure, which is like superfood for microbes, and then
Yeah.
they need that.
Now, are you familiar with Alan Booker? Do you know him? He told us that we had to be very, very careful. He does a lot of regenerative stuff, but he told us we had to be very careful of importing because of now there's these herbicides, grazon. Like you can accidentally bring trauma back in if you're not careful. So that was a whole nother level that we had to now query the farmer, and we know the farmer and we know his fields, but we also know the person who he sometimes get haze from, and we know their field. Like we've had to get, you have to be really careful these days, don't you?
You mentioned gray zone, and I used a quart of gray zone per acre every year, sometimes twice,
Mm.
and it does persist in the soil horribly. It does have a half life. It will eventually go away or become less and less and less. But yeah, I mean, what you bringing onto the land, trash in, trash out, but
Hmm.
mainly you getting organic matter onto the land, especially in the form of manure, is just so beneficial. You got to feed those microbes so they can feed the plant, so the plant can feed the soil. It's
Yeah.
everything is so very cyclical. What we try to make it so linear, but it's not. It's very cyclical.
Well, how is business these days? Are people catching on and understanding the importance of, paying a premium for good quality food? Is that where are people getting there or more to go?
More to go. Increasingly people are aware of the ills of modern food production, and that's great. The big major food companies are increasingly skilled at greenwashing, and that's
Mm.
horrible. And
Hmm.
and it really so our business was really quite profitable for a small family farm back in the early 2000s when I started actually having something to sell that was a regenerative grass-fed beef, and we did well. Uh, I'm not sure of the year. I think it might have been 2005, but they changed the rule on product of the USA. Prior to the change, in the case of cattle, they had to be born, raised, and slaughtered in the United States to be a product of the USA. They changed the law, changed the rules so that if value is added in the United States, it's a product of the USA. And that opened the gates for imported grass-fed beef from 20 something countries: Uruguay, New Zealand, Australia, 17 or 18 other countries could bring in grass-fed beef, and somehow they do it cheaper than we can. And it's just a real problem. Greenwashing is the nemesis of this enlightened sort of agriculture, land management that some of us is our passion.
Now, I've never understood how they can do that cheaper and ship it. Like you go to the store and you see a bottle of Argentinian wine for $5. I don't even know if I could buy the bottle empty for that much, if I was setting up a business. I am still confused by that and how that actually operates.
Yeah, I am too, and I don't want to. I'm sure there's some fantastic winemakers and grass-fed beef producers in those countries that probably do everything right. I suspect maybe there's some that don't, and I'm not sure how these low costs make it to our shores, but they do. And I think that if the product was properly labeled, legitimately labeled, so that people could tell what they're buying, some people are still going to buy the cheapest product out there, and that's fine. That's their right. But let's tell the truth on the package so that people can make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we advocate for.
I would totally agree. I don't know if you're familiar, but right now in Germany, there's this huge farmer protest. They're like taking over all the major highways and cities, and there's just, thousands of tractors and all this and that. And their main complaint seems to be that it's becoming impossible to farm because it's just more regulations, more fees, more taxes. They pass more rules. A good friend of mine is a dairy farmer up out of Maine, and just hearing the endless litany of it, there's these rules that just come along, and every one of them comes with a price tag but no funding, right? And over time, you find out that they end up the commodity cost is the same as it was 10 years ago, but your input costs have doubled in some cases. It just gets harder and harder. Does that at all feel intentional to you? I mean, is this intentional, or are these people just ignorant who pass these rules? Which way do you lean?
Oh no, oh no, people are not ignorant. I mean, they absolutely. It's not ignorance. There are agendas there, and I'm not the best guy to analyze all those things. Big food, big ag, big tech are the enemies of those of us who farm in a more natural uh, and environmentally focused way.
Mm-hmm.
I use a lot of adjectives there. Uh, the so what is it? It depends on whose numbers you look at. But like 15 cents of every food dollar goes to the farm. Now that depends on whose report you're looking at and what
Mm-hmm.
commodity you're looking at. But I think that number's commonly bannered around. At White Oak Pastures, 100 cents of every dollar that we sell direct to consumers comes back to this farm. Now, the farm is not that profitable, but the community is so much better off.
Mm-hmm.
I told you that Clay County, Georgia, it was the poorest county in the United States in 2020. I think that's right. What I didn't tell you is that I've got 170 or so employees, and my payroll is $100,000 a week in Bluffton, Georgia. I mean, it is an economic game changer, and it looks like it. If you visited Bluffton, Georgia today, it is a very nice little community. It's tiny, but it's nice, and the quality of life is very good here. And that's completely different from what we had 15 or 20 years ago when this was quickly becoming a ghost town. The only thing you could buy in Bluffton was a stamp. And that was about 2 hours a day. And you needed to know which 2 hours you could get in there and get a stamp. Today it's a nice little town. And it's because of that over 85 cents staying here locally. And I believe I know we're producing 20 something million dollars worth of food that I think it's real good food.
That is
I think it's
impressive.
good. I think it's good for you. I know it's good for the local economy. I think it's good for your body. I think it's good for the water that's flowing off this farm to the Gulf of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good for the pesticides that are put up. They show up in the polar ice caps. Come on, pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of benefits. And then this gets back to what you mentioned earlier about these costs of cheap commodity products that aren't paid for when you buy that cheap commodity. Those costs are scattered out over the rest of the planet. don't even want to talk about global warming and stuff like that. That's above my pay grade. But all these things that we have done to industrially produce food. And when I say we, I mean me. I was a very industrial producer for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Have great cost.
Yeah, the as they say in the nutrition space, cheap food is expensive because it'll give you all kinds of health issues over time and all of that. But you know, I'm of an age, right? So I'm 61 now. My nickname was Nature
Kid,
Boy when I
kid.
yeah, born in 62. I heard when you were born. It's coming. I got to move somewhere warmer. We know this is true. Uh, but my name was Nature Boy. I was outside all the time, right? If you said, "Hey, can you show me a frog or a toad or a snake?" I wouldn't show you a frog, toad, or snake. I knew which one. Like that, they were all known to me. So I was pretty observant. And I did all kinds of fishing and hunting and stuff like that. And I can tell you today, Will, I am terrified by the lack of insects that I see. They're just missing, right? You sure you get some, but they're when I was a kid, when I was a boy, if you left the light on the porch and you woke up in the morning, it was like a menagerie, right? Walking sticks and big moths and these giant staghorn beetles. I don't see those anymore. Kind of like the dead zone in the Gulf. I think that it's very clear that the cost of our industrial agriculture, not to put it all on agriculture alone, but the cost of that is exceedingly high. And I think we're going to skate towards the edge of oblivion. If insects are a 400 million year old food web. You talk about the cycles. I don't see the birds coming back anymore. So it's very obvious to me that there's something really not good happening outside. And I don't know that most people know that these days.
I know it. I know it. I understand it completely. And I can tell you that one of the ancient Greeks said, for every pestilence that nature sends, she sends the cure.
Hmm.
And that's the way it's supposed to work. But what we did post World War II, my dad's generation and then later mine, is we adapted these technologies to kill things. Side means kill, right? Pesticide, herbicide, insecticide, nematicide. Side means kill. So we embraced this reductionist production model so that we became hunters and we walked the fields and pastures and paddocks. And whatever we saw that we didn't like, we killed it. We had a side that would kill it. And they were highly efficacious. It killed the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it killed other things too. It never just killed the target. So when we would use these pesticides to kill the target, we threw things out of balance because we killed other things too. So something else would surface as a pest or a problem, and we would kill that. And something else would surface. And the more pesticides we put out there, the more things we kill, the more pesticides we need. And it's a cycle that is horribly destructive. It's horribly expensive, but it's horribly destructive. And we are in the midst of it. And I was a perpetrator, I was good at the side business. I was a good hunter. But when I quit, it was painful. It was because I would see these problems out there and I would not use the technology to get rid of it. And I just had to put up with it. And it took a long time to get things in balance. And now I've gone from looking for something to kill to keeping things alive, keeping things going. And that's what I do for a living.
Mm. So you had this blinding epiphany at some point. You quit. You quit the dark side. I've heard about that side. What did you of your successes? What did you do where you just look back and you say, "Yeah, I got that right"?
I'm sorry. What did it ask the question again?
What when you look back, what are your successes? Like you look back and you say, "Okay, that was hard, but that was the right thing to do." Maybe you didn't know it at the time, but when you look back, what really turned the corner for you in this story?
Well, I don't know this. I mean, it depends on the area you look at. The number of the soil we talked about 0.5% to 5%.
Hmm.
My herd going from animals that parasites just ate them up. I had to put, give them wormer and spray for flies, to a really healthy herd that is so much self-maintaining. Huge cattle that I had to haul feed to much smaller, more efficient cattle that breed and have babies and raise them. The town has gone from being literally a ghost town to being a very nice little place to live. Uh, Having three or four minimum wage employees to having 170 employees, it makes significantly above the county average. Salary. I'm not proud of what our people make. It's not much, but
Hmm.
it's significantly above the county average. So, I mean, there's just, where do you want to look? There's something good just about everywhere.
That's,
And I'm not even counting the fact that I'm not contributing to killing the Gulf of Mexico like I used to, or contributing
hmm.
to pesticides being up there and whatever.
That is fantastic. I mean, congratulations. That's really quite a legacy you've got there. And $100,000 a week coming in is an amazing thing.
Well, and I'll tell you
Um,
another one. I'll tell you another one. I'm the fourth generation of my family to manage this farm. And I have three daughters. Two of them and their spouses came back, and they wouldn't have in the industrial model. And they've got five babies who are back on the farm.
that's that's incredible. Congratulations on that too.
Thank you.
I know what that means. That means a lot. So is if we so are other people like do other farmers follow your model? I'll tell you what, I was watching a video of Gabe Brown, right? So there he is up in North Dakota, 15 inches total moisture to work with a year, you know, and somehow without bringing any inputs, he's managed to like turn his farm around and do this incredible thing at scale, right? 3,000 acres. But his neighbor's been right next door to him for 30 years watching and hasn't changed a thing. Still compacts their soil, still has horrible water intrusion of, maybe a half inch per hour, you know, uh, just does the whole model and it's clearly successful. Do you have the same experience?
Yes. Is that Gabe Brown you're talking about?
Yeah.
Gabe Brown's my best friend. I've been to his farm. He's been down here and he's coming back week after next. And we talk about it all the time. But yes, we've got the same situation. None of my family, friends, relatives have embraced this sort of farming, and it's not their fault. They're good people. They're wonderful people, but they're doing what their dad and probably granddad did. They're doing what they learned at the University of Georgia or Auburn University or the University of Florida.
Hmm.
They're doing what the county agent tells them to that comes around. They're doing what the pesticide sales people that are very sharp, smart, highly paid, professional people tell them what they're doing, what they believe they're supposed to be doing, and they're making a pretty decent living at it. I mean, it's not, these farmers are not starving. It's not a good return on investment. Guess what? White oak pasture is not a good return on investment. And I
Hmm.
love it. But you can't say these guys are stupid for farming that way. They're not stupid. They're farming the way they've been trained, they've been positioned, they've been shaped, and they're good at it. And the market does not reward them to change. The
Hmm.
market does not reward them to change. So guess what? Probably not many gonna change.
Yeah. Um, Charlie Munger, who just passed recently, said, "You show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome." Has nothing to do with whether the good people are bad, but I get it. That's what I'm really poking at here is the incentives of the system are very much always trying to push us towards cost efficiency as if the dollar was this amazing thing. And that's what matters most is just the cost efficiency. But that's clearly killing us at this point in time. When you look at all the big stats on our country, probably the least healthy we've ever been, more obesity, more people on psychoactive drugs, whatever. But you could probably guess that maybe something our food is somewhere responsible for this. And we're still not having that conversation in the media. But I tell you, this conversation is growing at the edges all the time. COVID woke a lot of people up to what's actually going on out there in the health and nutrition space. And it's a lot of people making up their own minds now. So I think this is actually a good moment in time.
Well, you're a little more optimistic than I am. I hope you're right. I agree with what you're saying, but there is so much money out there in the agricultural supply chain coming and going. There's so much technology out there that's so expensive. These costs that we incur that are spun off that everybody covers is an issue. The consumer's bandwidth is so
Mm,
narrow and it's so hard to understand. And the big multinational corporations are so skilled and gifted at messaging and greenwashing
mm,
that I agree with everything you said. I hope it's true, but I'm not as optimistic as you. People,
mm,
people, my food, let's just face it, my food costs more than industrial food. It just does. I'm unapologetic about it. I hate it, but I'm unapologetic about it. And so many people out there are so confused by this really skilled, intentional greenwashing that keeps things at question. Uh, and it's just a matter of time before those of us in leadership are turned into victims. I mean, if you if any of us says too much, that's probably me. It could be a lot of adversity brought. I don't mean a hitman. I mean government investigation or bad media or whatever happens to people. So this I don't think we're in the home stretch on improving our farming and eating situation.
Well, you may be right. I'm just noticing more people waking up, which is good. It may not be critical mass yet, but and you're right. There are big dark forces that are very interested in keeping us divided, confused, fighting each other, and if necessary, they'll bring down some harassment. You get shadow banned, outright banned, censored, maybe government agents, and then they'll take that as far as they need to get what they want. And but again, you show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. So it's all about money. Our money system is really kind of broken because it allows some really bad things to happen, unfortunately, worldwide. But this is about to change big time, I think, over this next few years because let's face it, our country's broke right now, and but we're spending more. You know, it just sooner or later, I think that what you have is actually what every single town is going to want is having its own base of production for its own food. It's going to need it, and if it can do it sustainably or regeneratively, even better. I think that is the highest asset any locality could be have. Your area is very lucky to have you there.
Well, I certainly feel fortunate in that this change occurred on my watch.
Mm,
The my great grandfather and grandfather had watches on the farm, and they did what they could or should have done during those watches, and it was successful. My dad took over the farm and during the industrialization and did what he had to do and was successful with it. I'm just really glad this occurred on my watch. I mean, I think it's yeah, I'm doing what I want to do, and
mm.
it feels good, and I'm really enjoying doing it.
Well, fantastic. So, in terms of getting these cycles all going again, so you mentioned soil cycle, hydrological cycle, all that. What's you mentioned animal impact is the thing I need to be focusing on potentially. Um, what would somebody like say they've just got a house, and maybe a garden. What would be the approach that they might take to really beginning to improve the abundance and richness of where they live?
Well, that's a little bit like how long is the string. I mean, it depends on how big that garden spot is and where it is. But to have, uh, you got to have some animal impact. You can't have, if you got a yard, you don't have a cow, but you can have some rabbits and some chickens and some, maybe some sheep or goats, depends on how big the yard is. I think
Mm-hmm.
the cattle, I'm a cow guy, but that's everybody's default is I want to get some cattle when they got a piece of land. And often I see them putting cattle where there's just not enough land there to make that work well. You can do it, but to make it work well.
Mm-hmm.
But and you're talking to a farmer, not a homesteader. I mean, if I'm a stockman, not a homesteader. So I'm
Yep.
not the best guy to ask what you should do with your 0.3 acres because I've never had 0.3 acres. I always had a farm. But,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that the first thing you do is you focus on restarting those cycles of nature. It's not rocket science. I mean, if you just go outside and look and think about it, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the mineral cycle, all these things uh, have a natural course that can be followed. And the rules are the same whether you're in the upper Midwest or the coast of California or Florida, but the ecosystem is different. So you've got the rules are the same, but you've got to play it differently. And one of the things that's wrong, one of the things that's wrong with our education system is we have turned it into such a linear. I've already said that one
Mm-hmm.
time. Such a linear that if you become a soil scientist, you can be a good soil scientist whether you're in the Everglades, on the mountain, or on the Great Plains. If you're a plant pathologist, you good all over the world. These professors, you see them go from one land grant to the other, from northeast, southwest. I'm not sure that's the way it's supposed to be. I think we're supposed to become experts in our own ecology. I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm really good at doing what I do in Bluffton, Georgia. When I go see my friend Gabe in North Dakota that you just mentioned, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just super aware of the fact that I have no idea what you ought to do here
Yeah.
with cattle. With cattle, I mean, what I'm basic to. So it's just in my mind becoming so knowledgeable in one little narrow discipline is like watching a baseball game through one slat going in the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And I come from a philosophy that you need to be able to see the whole thing. It may be much more shallow. It will be much more shallow, but you can see the whole process in play.
I agree. I agree. We're on our flatlands is maybe 28 acres. We got another 200 up the hill. I don't know anything about what's going on up there because I don't visit it enough. It's all trees and woods and stuff. But even just on the flat, every corner of my field is different. I'm just learning that in the third year. I'm sure by 10 years I'll actually figure out how they're different in some way, but I can tell they're different. They drain different, they get different wind patterns. It's just everything's different, even on that small of a scale. Yeah. So
Well,
it
Wendell
takes
Berry
time.
talks about the value of a man knowing his land, all the little nuances of his parcel of land, whether it's 5,000 acres or 0.5 acres, it don't matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I really do appreciate what you're doing, and I love that you make time to talk to people about it. I do, in my heart of hearts, know that regenerative agriculture. Right, here's my pessimist coming out. People are like, oh, we should get on solar energy. I'm like, one way or the other, in 100, 200 years, we're going to be on solar energy, 100%. But maybe like your great granddad, you know, we'll get there. It's not clear to me that we're going to be able to keep this whole complex techno thing going, maybe, but there's some issues there potentially. So with that, I really support what you're doing, and I would like to direct people to your website, and to understand that when they are buying steaks or whatever they're buying from you, that those are being sold at the cost that's necessary to produce quality food that isn't ruining the world.
Did you know that we just released a book?
I did not know that.
We
Sorry.
did. We did. A Bold Return to Giving a Damn is the name of it. And it was just released this fall. Penguin, Viking, Random House. And it's a book about white oak pastures and the evolution from food raised properly to food raised industrially, and the journey back to food raised properly. So I hope you'll have a look at it.
A bold return to giving a damn. Absolutely will. Absolutely will. And would just without reading it, I'm sure I could recommend it to everybody here. And whiteoakpastures.com, is that the correct website for people to go to?
Whiteoakpastures.com. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And it's I hope to come down and have a visit someday. Do you have tours? Do you allow people to come see?
No, we do. In fact, that's transparency and genuineness is what we got to sell. I mean, I can't. If you're
Yeah.
asking people to buy beef that costs more than the other beef, you darn well better have something to show them about why that is. And we feel like if we can get people to the farm, we can make customers out of them. So we have a restaurant here on the farm that serves 21 meals a week. We've
Hmm.
got lodging, we got cabins you can come stay in. We got an RV park. We got a store. It is a we've it's a very rural area, and there wasn't a lot of commerce, and we've really turned it into a place that I hope people will want to come and visit.
How many could you host at a time?
Hmm. I'll have to ask my daughter. Uh, Probably 25 or 30. I mean, it's not big. We're adding to that gradually and
Yeah.
as we can, but it's
Yeah, we
we also have I mentioned this to you because I think this isn't trying to sell anything. This is trying to help people. But we formed a 501(c)(3) about 2 years ago called CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience. And we've got a very uh, talented executive director, Dr. Carly Redding, and she hosts sessions here on what we do from the gardening to the beekeeping to the things that the more animal agriculture things that I'm personally more interested in. So also check out CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience.
well, fantastic. We'll do that. And part of my team lives down in Georgia, down in LJ,
Wow.
which is up north. But we do get down there a bit. And when we went and visited, we had a nice not last year, the year before. We took our crew went to Swope, Virginia, to Joel Salatin's place. We had about 250 show up for that because a lot of people very very passionately involved in what you're doing, and I have to see it myself. I would love to come sometime and bring some people. And you know what? You know the first thing I do? I just grab some soil and I smell it. That's the like right. You just that's you can that's my primary way of understanding what's happening somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it's the soils that we've managed for 25 years. You'd be very pleased. It's over 5% organic matter, and it's just incredible what it's doing. We've got farms that I've had for shorter periods of time. In fact, we've got about 2,000 acres that we're grazing that is solar voltaic arrays. And we have the contract to maintain the vegetation. And we do it with sheep. We got about 3,000 or 4,000 sheep out there. And we have to do some mowing too. Because when these solar voltaic companies buy these farms, they're already horribly degraded from industrial farming. And then it's a construction site for a year or two. So they really
Hmm.
chop it up. and then they turn it over to us and to graze and maintain to keep the vegetation down, which grazing is my goal. And when we first get them, we have to mow and mow and mow. We don't spray, but we do have to do a lot of mowing. But as time goes on, we do less mowing and more grazing as the soil heals and becomes more microbially active, and the organic matter raises up. And it's just incredible what having those grazing animals does versus what just mowing does or spraying worse.
That's an impressive thing. Do you have to reseed under there usually?
Well, not after we get it established. When they during the construction project, we had to the first one I did was not seeded very well, and it was rough. But then the company's really embraced what we're doing. It's called Silicon Ranch. They're from Nashville, and they very much advocate grazing now, and they allow us to establish the grass before they do the construction project. Now, the construction project damages the grass, but it's so much better than just starting out with that raw earth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. God, so impressive. So, God, I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for making time today. We'll get this out there to everybody who follows my work, and I'm gonna stay in touch because I really want to come take a tour sometime. We'll bring some people along, and and I would advise everybody go check out whiteoakpastures.com. Got a great store there. It's a great operation. I mean, you got a restaurant, you got tours, obviously, but the base load is farming and farming right. I really admire what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. I do look forward to your visit. Hope you will come.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, all the best. Will, thank you so much for your time. Hope you
Thank
enjoyed
you.
this, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.